Speaking in tongues, for some people, it's this incredibly profound spiritual experience. But for a lot of others, it's just a source of confusion, maybe even controversy. But what if the real key to understanding this whole thing has been hiding in plain sight all along? Okay, let's dive into this. So here's the big question that seems to stump everybody. When people talk about tongues, are we talking about real, actual human languages? Or is it some kind of heavenly, angelic prayer language? It's a puzzle that has honestly left believers divided for centuries. But here's the twist. Our usual starting point for this conversation, the New Testament. Well, that isn't actually where the story begins. To really get to the bottom of this, we have to look somewhere else entirely. That's right. The answer isn't really in the book of Acts or in Paul's letters. It starts thousands of years earlier, way back in the book of Genesis. The real origin story here isn't about the Holy Spirit arriving, but about humanity being scattered. Okay, so let's start with a story most of us know, the Tower of Babel. But to really understand Pentecost, we have to see this as way more than just a simple story about why we have different languages. According to the source material for this explainer, this was the scene of a cosmic catastrophe, a fundamental break between God and humanity. Yeah, a cosmic rupture. In this ancient way of seeing the world, when God confused everyone's language at Babel, he didn't just scatter them across the globe. He basically disinherited the nations. He placed them under the authority of lesser spiritual beings and set apart only the nation of Israel for himself. This one event really sets the stage for the rest of biblical history. And that cosmic catastrophe is the perfect setup for what comes next, Pentecost. You see, the core idea here is that the miracle on the day of Pentecost isn't just some random event. No, it's the direct, intentional, and powerful reversal of the judgment that happened at Babel. This is the moment God starts reclaiming everything that was lost. Now this is where it gets really fascinating. The author of Acts, Luke, leaves these little linguistic fingerprints all over the text to connect these two events. At Babel, God confuses the language. The Greek word is suncheo. At Pentecost, the crowd is bewildered. It's the exact same word, suncheo. At Babel, humanity is divided, diamerizo. At Pentecost, the tongues of fire are divided, diamerizo. It's incredible. Luke is basically shouting at us that Pentecost is the direct undoing of Babel. And you see this pattern pop up again and again throughout the book of Acts. When does speaking in tongues happen? Well, it happens at these key pivotal moments when the gospel crosses a major cultural boundary, first to the Samaritans, then to the non-Jewish Gentiles, and then to these disciples of John. Each and every time, the gift of tongues acts as this public sign, this divine stamp of approval, that God is now reclaiming these disinherited people. Okay, so this brings us to probably the most complicated piece of the puzzle, the church in Corinth. This was a messy situation, and the Apostle Paul wasn't introducing the gift to them. He was having to lay down some serious ground rules to fix how they were misusing it. Paul isn't celebrating the chaos in Corinth. He's correcting it, and his logic is crystal clear. For this gift to be useful, it has to be understandable. If someone speaks in a tongue, it must be interpreted. If there's no interpreter there, then they need to stay quiet. Why? Because the whole point is to build up the entire community, not just make one person feel good. Speech that no one can understand helps absolutely no one. Aha, you might say, but what about this famous verse, the tongues of angels? A lot of people see this as clear proof of a heavenly prayer language, but the source material here argues that this is what you'd call rhetorical hyperbole. Paul is pushing his point to the absolute extreme. He's saying, look, even if I could speak every single language on earth and in heaven, without love, it's all just meaningless noise. This isn't a definition of a new gift. It's an argument for the absolute supremacy of love. And that leads us to the modern idea of a private prayer language. Now, many people find this practice deeply meaningful, and that's important. But the source material for this explainer suggests that the biblical case for it isn't really conclusive. The overwhelming focus in the Bible is on the public corporate gift, the one that can be understood and serves the whole church. The idea of a private practice is seen as something that's possible, sure, but not definitively proven by the text. All right, this brings us to our next section, and to what is maybe the most serious theological question in this whole discussion. Does the Bible actually teach that you have to speak in tongues to be saved? So, let's just put the question right out there, plain and simple. Is this experience a non-negotiable? Is speaking in tongues required for a person to be saved? Well, the book of Acts itself gives a pretty loud and clear answer. No. Just look at this list. the Ethiopian official, the Apostle Paul himself, Lydia, the Philippian jailer. I mean, these are all powerful, undeniable stories of conversion, and in not one of them is speaking in tongues even mentioned. That shows us it can't be a universal requirement for every single believer.
So let's pull all these threads together. Let's zoom out. From that cosmic rupture in Babel, to the grand reversal at Pentecost, to the strict rules in Corinth. What's the big picture that's been forming?
Here's the central argument, the main thesis of this whole thing. Tongues were never meant to be primarily about a private, personal experience. They are a public, cosmic sign. They are a declaration to the entire world that the curse of Babel is being undone, and that God is calling a people home from every single scattered tribe, language, and nation. And that leaves us with this final thought to chew on. What if we've been looking at this gift through the wrong end of the telescope the whole time? What if the whole point of tongues was never about an internal feeling for us, but about an external, history-shaping, public message from God to all the nations of the earth?